In this episode, we're looking at undoubtedly the greatest vampire character of all time. Created by Bram Stoker and now in the public domain, he spawned hundreds of adaptations and countless imitators. We're talking about Count Dracula. Here we go. And here we are again for another episode of Greatest Characters in Pop Culture History. I'm so happy that today I have writer Stephen Van Patten, also known as SVP. He's a writer of a great trilogy called Brookwater's Curse, and you could find out more details about this at laughingblackvampire.com. So what a perfect person to have on to talk today about Dracula, one of the greatest characters of all time. So
yes.
Was Dracula specifically an inspiration for you to write your vampire stories?
Well, certainly to a degree. So my journey actually started with being a latchkey kid, growing up in the 70s. And I was unsupervised a little more than I should have been. My mother was working very hard for AT&T, and my stepfather was a drunk. So that left me with access to the television. And my first vampire was Christopher Lee.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of the gateway drug, if you want to be serious about it. Then, of course, found Bela Lugosi and his very his way of doing things. And then there was Frank Langella, and then everything else just kind of came as, because, it was I just fell in love with the genre there. In terms of the actual book, the way I finally got my hands on that, because oddly enough, my mother had Interview with a Vampire laying around. Somehow I acquired Salem's Lot. Hadn't gotten to Dracula until I had a very sort of forward-thinking English professor who was like, okay, you guys can read whatever you want, but it has to be a novel. It has to have some sort of classic sense of things and whatever else. And I said, I would like to do Dracula and Frankenstein piece. And,
nice.
Of course, everybody else in the room was like, the fuck? But I got to do what I wanted, and I got to read both books, and, and I got that out of the way. And obviously, as a kid, it's not this, you don't get the same, you don't get everything because you don't understand the world yet. You think you do, but you don't understand the world enough to necessarily pick up everything Bram Stoker, good or bad, is trying to lay out in terms of the swarthy dark visitor from another country type thing. But, I always remained very invested in the genre. And then when I started writing my own stuff, because then that's the other thing. You're a black man and you're into horror, but then you start realizing that something you love doesn't necessarily love you back. And then that opens the conversation, of course, to, the brother being the first one dead and all that stuff. And then, of course, I discovered Blackula, and then that sent me in a whole other direction. So, yeah, in terms of my inspirations, it's like a giant octopus. And there's one arm here, one arm there.
Right.
It's kind of just, but in the end of the day, that particular childhood, those particular experiences, that particular type of exposure, they made me want to do what I do.
Yeah, I think giant octopus, all the arms stretching out, all the tentacles, that kind of describes what Bram Stoker unleashed with Dracula, because
yes,
I've said it before in other episodes, it's like all these characters, whether it's Sherlock Holmes, Jekyll and Hyde, people aren't introduced to the original source material first. It's all these adaptations that come after it because it's had such an impact on pop culture. You mentioned Christopher Lee. I mean, he did a dozen Dracula movies, but then Bela Lugosi was the one who really, I think his portrayal made everything that followed, all those cliches, all the stereotypes, all the tropes of that, noble character who is also a monster, follow course. So that's pretty cool. And then you mentioned, I think you're from Brooklyn. I'm from the Bronx.
I am.
When we were younger, you mentioned latchkey kids. It's that's what our generation is really like. We're out riding our bikes or running around, playing outside, stickball or whatever it was. And our parents were like, we knew we were out there, right? So that's how we got into the genre. Like I got into the comic books, I got into the horror and science fiction, and then you try
Dracula,
to do some
baby.
writing. But you lucked out and you're published and you started getting like these stories. So that's great. I mean, we can jump through like just Bram Stoker didn't invent the vampire. This was like
True.
around this, vampire lore has been around forever. But he did invent a lot of the tropes that we associate now with vampires in his story. Like he was the first that vampires don't reflect in mirrors, right? I think. And, a lot of these other things that we associate, he invented that,
Yes.
So what specific aspects of vampires did you gravitate to? Was it the fact that they were like what Dracula is? He seems like this noble, charismatic character, but he's a monster.
Well, I mean, I guess in a good and bad way, as a kid, you meet people that are living double lives and you don't necessarily know right away. But, it's funny because little kids, they're very instinctive and they know when something is fishy with a person. More often than not, before the adults around that person. You know what I mean? So I think that was part of it for me. He also, I mean, in other adaptations and things that I saw, like movie-wise and whatever, I mean, along with just being a boss, he was a ladies' man. And that's not necessarily in the source. That's not necessarily in the source material. That's not necessarily in the book. For something that spawned a whole lot of Mina, I love you stuff. The book's not romantic. And I've had this argument with a couple of people, but it's like there is, because again, as a kid, I know stuff's flying over, or at least looking back on it, I know a lot of stuff flew over my head. Looking at it now, I'm like, man, this dude was like he was, I hate to say it, but it was kind of like on some pimp shit, He just came into town and he was like, look, this is what I'm putting down and y'all can get with this or not.
Yeah.
And what I always found interesting, because there's always the talk of like, well, what do you use to kill a vampire? How do you kill a vampire? And all that other stuff. And in the original folklore, there was no, like, you hold up a crucifix and he goes away thing. When I say original folklore, I'm talking about stuff straight out of Romania that, helped inspire his thing. But you got to think about it from the sense that if you don't have a cross, if you don't have the cross as a repellent, if you don't have the whole you have to invite me in thing,
right?
It's a much shorter book.
That's true.
Because then there's nothing stopping him.
This it. Is like, they need a weakness. They need something to,
Right, so that you actually can,
exactly.
Have a story. And side note, one thing that's always bothered me, and they do it all the time, Salem's Lot in particular, this whole once you realize you have a vampire that you are dealing with, and the vampire is somewhere sleeping, you've got all day now.
Right, they're not going anywhere.
You've got all day to figure out who this is so you can, and dudes, if sunset is 6:30, these cats are finding a place at 6:20. You gotta fight some kind of hench person or a werewolf or some other nonsense. And by the time you get to the coffin, he's like, yo, what's good? And like, what are we doing?
Yeah. That's why they need those familiars or something. They need somebody like Renfield that can, protect them during the day or something. But they always got to find but that's storytelling, right? That's where you got to, if you make a character that's so powerful, in this case, they can shape shift, right? He turns into a wolf or a bat. They can hypnotize people and, they're super strong and, you got to give them some weakness. So then they come up with like garlic or, religious icons because they're supposed to be undead and evil, right? And
that's the thing. Garlic actually makes more sense because garlic is a blood purifier. And if you're trying to look at it from a scientific standpoint, this is somebody who has something wrong in their bloodstream that makes them
it's
need
a disease,
to drink
right? A lot of people look at it.
If you're gonna go there, then garlic makes more sense. The crucifix thing, because at the end of the day, all right. So what happens if I'm Jewish.
And they've played that. A couple of like others have like been like,
I
if
mean,
they have
yeah.
no belief, right? Then it's like, what is it?
There's
Yeah.
that. There's the faith thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I always love the way they handled that in Salem's Lot with Barlow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in most of the old school stuff, you had a cross, you're good, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And what's wild to me is it doesn't matter what kind of person you are.
Yeah.
Like, you could really be a jerk. Like, just all outside of all kinds of, moral character, but you got a cross, so you're good. So what does that, but what does that translate into? Does that work with a crescent from Islam?
Yeah.
Does that work with a Star of David? I'm going to say no.
Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of people have dropped that trope here or there, or they play with, the silver. Is that just for werewolves, or does that impact, vampires
Or you got Jerry
too?
Dandridge laughing in your face,
It's all good. But I like the
Yeah.
stake through the heart or the iron, whether it's wooden or iron. That's always pretty cool. But yeah, and then, and another thing that's in Stoker's, he gets weakened by the sun. He doesn't get killed by the sun. It was the
that's right.
Nosferatu, the first movie that they made, that kind of made it where it's like he starts burning and.
So, and can I real quick
Sure.
explain what what's been explained to me in terms of that Nosferatu movie?
Okay.
Right? Because, so first of all, it was a blatant ripoff
Total
of the Stoker
rip-off.
story.
They didn't get
right?
permission. Yeah.
Didn't get permission. They figured they just changed the names, right? They changed all the names, and then they staged it in Germany instead of England.
But it's
Now,
the same story.
But it's the exact same story outside of that. And I'll give Germany logistically makes more sense, right? It's closer. It's still a bustling, what passed for a bustling metropolis in that time. So in a way, yeah, sure. Why do that? Why go all the way to New York when you can go to Detroit? No disrespect to Germany. But, so the way I've heard it, they were under siege from lawyers. They were way over budget. Apparently the lighting, they were trying to end the damn movie. And apparently the lighting director said, well, just let the sunlight kill him.
That's great.
And there you have it. End scene. Now, I don't know if you saw the remake.
The one that just came out.
Yeah.
Because there was another one in the 70s or 80s.
Yes.
But this recent one was, I enjoyed it.
It was like when you talk about a horror movie that's beautifully shot. I mean, jeez.
Yeah.
But yeah, they stuck to that same, they stuck that same landing. So
exactly.
But they didn't, that's the other thing. The disintegration thing has always been a little much too, if you think about it. It's like, really? Is that? Like, we just gone, like, you're just in sunlight, which, again, going back into science, sunlight is almost most of the same components as moonlight.
Because, moonlight is just a reflection of the sun. So
right.
That's a good point.
So you don't just die, you become this flattened out Wile E. Coyote death thing.
Wile E. Coyote.
I would really like to see something where none of these old rules are in play. And it's funny because when I started my stuff, I didn't even do this. I stuck with a lot of the same things. I didn't let sunlight disintegrate my vampires. I, just let them get real sick, and then just,
which is what Stoker
and
did. Like, they weaken them. He loses his powers. So when you start writing about vampires, then did you feel like a burden? Like, okay, when people think vampire, they're already going to think, they get hurt by sunlight. And so you have to do a lot more world building, do you think, to kind of explain that?
Well, any horror writer gets caught up in this. You're establishing the threat, and then you're world building, but then you also, once you set the rules in play, you have to stick to the rules, no matter where the story takes you, So if you have the crucifix thing working in the beginning, it has to work to the end, unless you write something so amazing that it makes sense. Because once you start getting too inconsistent with a story, you take your readers right out.
Yeah. And then you got to, there's the rule in filmmaking too, and screenwriting. It's like, if you introduce a gun in Act 1, you better fire that gun by Act 3 or something. It's like you're setting things up that the audience now is anticipating, or you can surprise them. But so that's great. We talked about the folklore inspiration. So a lot of these myths come from like people just being buried alive, and they dug them up and they see the blood and everything. So they're like, oh, they must be coming alive in the middle of the night, and a lot of the superstitions and everything. And then Bram Stoker was the first to kind of turn a novel into this, to make this gothic vampire novel. There was, a short story by Polidori, who was like that famous night where Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. They had that writing contest, and he's like, yeah, I'll do a short story about a vampire, but this was the first novel that really, kind of set that trend. And a lot of people say he was inspired by Vlad the Impaler, but there's debate about that, because at first he didn't name him Dracula. I think it was supposed to be like Count Vampire or some other name, and then he saw the name of Vlad the Impaler's dad, who was Vlad Dracul, right, the devil. And he was from the Order of the Dragon. So it just sounds like a cool name. Dracula is a very cool name, right?
Yes.
And then just setting it in Romania and the castle and, Transylvania, it's just, it already gives it that lore. So the whole story, I doubt there's anyone out there that doesn't know the story, but it's this solicitor, Jonathan Harker, comes and, and then it ends up that Dracula is like, okay, I'm going to follow you back to London. So he gets on the boat and, goes there. So there's a lot of the subtext about this outsider coming, even though he's noble. People are like, there is that
noble
subtext
in his own country, though. He's
right. So suddenly he's
just a guy
London.
in a fancy suit in England.
There you go. So there's a lot of that subtext about the threat of outsiders. And then during Victorian times, I just found out recently that there was this whole vampire frenzy in the 18th century before and then leading up. That's where all these like poems for, vampires started coming into being. So a lot of subtext that inspired him. But then the play, I think it was just like with Jekyll and Hyde. I feel like the play Dracula also, made people open their eyes. And that's where Bela Lugosi first gets his chance to play Dracula on stage. And he brings all this stuff, the accent and the way he moves and, his hands are like vultures, it's like it's just incredible, the claws. And then Universal's like, well, let's do a movie out of it. Low budget. This is not like a lot of money. And they're looking around trying to cast people. And Bela Lugosi's like, I'm playing him on stage. I want this part, and he's willing to take the low money that they gave him. But it was that one movie that he did. And he didn't do it again until Abbott and Costello, So
I know, right?
He got typecast, and then he's trying to avoid it, try to do all these other things until finally he's like, I need to make money. It's like, so he started embracing it and doing the stage play in different places, summer stock. But it's tragic how his career ended because he got addicted to morphine and everything. But here's this character that really took the world by storm. Every time people do, just a parody of it, they're parodying Bela Lugosi more so than the character in Bram Stoker's novel, right?
That's true.
So, and then all the other movies that came after. So you mentioned Christopher Lee. Is there any particular Christopher Lee a Dracula movie that comes to mind, or a scene, or anything you remember from being scared as a kid?
There's a few. Well, Satanic Rites of Dracula, Scars of Dracula. There was one with the four rich guys, and there was a guy that came to the little whorehouse where they like to hang out, and they got them to go out there and they messed him up in the end, but Dracula comes to life and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna hunt these cats down. And I was like, well, wait, do you even know who these dudes are? Like, how do you work that out? But I mean, I tell you, the wild thing about Christopher Lee, like some of those movies, you could count on, no pun intended, you could count on two hands how many words he actually said in some of those movies, but he was frightening as
He was very
hell.
frightening.
Like,
his eyes were bloodshot. And of course, the Hammer movies showed a lot more blood than some of those earlier Universal films.
I mean,
scary stuff.
So crazy. Like, they set the bar in terms of like what it looks like when someone's actually getting bitten in the neck. But it was, I mean, those movies like were just, here I am, I'm barely 10. And I'm sitting up watching all this stuff. And I think that was part of the problem too, because as a 10-year-old, I'm scared. So now I'm like, well, I'm just going to go be an expert on this mess. And,
how do we kill it just in case they really exist?
Just in case it shows up at my house, right?
It's like the Lost Boys, right? They become like running around getting all the material because they know they're experts.
It's like I get all that together, and before you know it, I'm reading about like the vampire the vampire legend that they had in Thailand, for example, which I think I've only seen depicted like in a movie or a series like maybe once or twice. But it's this princess that was burned alive because she was cheating on this guy she had been forced to marry, and this other guy she wanted. So she gets burned alive, but there was some sort of like witchy spell that had got put on her. So she hunts as a vampire, but she's disembodied. It's just the head and some of her like entrails, and this thing floats around and kills people. Like
Oh man.
I was 11 learning about that. So I was, yeah, yes,
But that's
everybody.
made you
I
the
was a
writer that you are
strange
today,
kid,
you know?
but yeah,
It's
no
those
doubt.
experiences that make you the writer that you are now. The sparks the imagination, you know?
Yeah, well, no doubt, no doubt.
Because you could have gone down a path of writing, like comedies or something else, but it took you towards horror and that story that you came up with, it's like that stems from that kind of experience, you know?
Yeah, no doubt. And also,
Yeah.
for me anyway, Blackula was an influence. And the guy that plays Dracula in Blackula, he was scary.
Yeah.
He's not on screen for very long, but
Right.
whoa, he was
Yeah.
great. I think I want to say his name was Charles.
Yeah, I did a
Charles
blog post looking at the many faces of Dracula where I looked at all the
Charles Macaulay. Sorry.
Yep, all the actors that play Dracula, and he was one of them, and I'm thinking, okay, there may be 20, 30, 40. It was like almost 300 movies, so it's like
Yeah.
it ended up being a long list.
It is a very long list.
But you bring your own, like, and I mean, I was thinking of who else. It's like so many that have played him. John Carradine was supposed to be. He was in the running to play the role before Bela Lugosi. You mentioned Christopher Lee, Frank Langella. I liked his version.
Yeah.
In the 70s. I was surprised they didn't do more sequels or anything with him because I thought he was pretty good, and that was again pretty faithful to the novel.
Yes.
I mean, Gary Oldman, Francis Ford Coppola's version, really went creative and did some really interesting things.
Absolutely. Just the costume design.
Oh yeah.
On that one was nuts. I want to say, speaking of faithful to the book, there's a version that was starred Louis Jourdan.
Yes.
That was about as step by step as I've ever seen. Because again, no romance. I'm here. I'm gonna have a couple of conversations, and then I'm gonna start doing my thing. That's basically how that was depicted. But yeah, and there's ones that people sleep on, like the dude. I'm blanking on his name, but I remember the dude that played Dracula in Monster Squad.
Yeah.
Like he was scary. I was like, oh damn.
I'm gonna put the link to my blog in the notes because it's like I list like a lot, but that was one that I remember as a kid. I was like, that was pretty good too,
Yeah.
Yeah, Monster Squad was a good one, and that was an underrated kind of movie because that combined all the other Universal monsters, and I was like, do more, we want more. And sometimes when they remake them, they're trying to reinvent the wheel, but like you said, the ones that really resonate are the ones that kind of stick close to the source material. Nosferatu, the recent remake, so that was playing up that unauthorized version, but he's got the mustache, and in the book, he's got a mustache and the pointy ears. And it was Bela Lugosi who was clean shaven, and that becomes the version that everybody knows. But that was interesting, because a lot of people are like, oh, he's got this kind of bushy mustache, and I'm like, that's pretty faithful to the novel. Yeah.
But you know who had a bushy mustache? Vlad the Impaler.
Yes, he did.
So when I saw that, at first I was like, what's with this Ron Jeremy porn stash? Like, what are we doing here? But then I started to think about it, and I was like, oh, maybe that's what they are trying for. I don't know if I ever get a chance to talk to somebody who actually worked on the film, that's probably going to be my question number one.
Yeah.
Were you guys just throwing it back to the portrait that we've all seen with the hat and the long hair and all that?
Yeah. No, that's I like that adaptation. I thought it was pretty good. Not every movie's perfect, but it was pretty good. And then just to go back to Bram Stoker's inspiration, apparently his mom told him stories about this cholera victims that were buried alive. So again, going back to the folklore of what maybe sparked, I can imagine him just kind of having nightmares about what his mom told him, and that's
Oh,
still
absolutely.
channeled through to when he's writing this story. You know?
Because part of that also is like, it's just like, I hate to say it, but it's kind of, in tune with like the Santa Claus thing. And like you got a kid's acting up. Like, how do I get this little MF in line? I know. I scare him with the story that they used to tell me about this, or it's, if it's not that, then it's Santa isn't bringing you your Xbox.
Yeah,
It's all that.
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, and of course, it's probably not just little kids. It's probably like, could be some just sort of like, some religious person in the village. It's like, why do we need you? You need me to protect you from blah blah blah.
Exactly.
See the guy in the coffin right there that looked like he was actually running around a couple of days ago. You need me to protect you from that. It could be just that simple.
Yeah, yeah. And I like how you described him as like this just badass that just kind of, Harker comes to him and he's like, okay, I'm going to come to your place now and steal
Well,
your
Harker,
fiance and steal,
yeah, Harker, he messed up. So first of all, it was Renfield that went over there first.
yes.
And Renfield comes back and he's batshit. And everybody's just going to play it off like, okay, so, and Renfield's telling people, it's like, yeah, the blood is the life and give me these bugs. And, he's wilding out. Jonathan, he's with Mina and he doesn't think he deserves Mina. That's a key component there. It's like, oh man, I love this girl, but I ain't making this bread. So it's like, what am I going to do? And the boss come, hey man, I know Renfield look crazy. He look nutty in his squirrel shit right now, but we still need somebody to go to Transylvania. And then that's the other thing. That's not an easy trip.
It's not.
You ain't got JetBlue or any of that other stuff. It's like, this is you in a carriage bumping around on these bumpy roads and all this other craziness, trains and this and that. And then you get there and dude is like, looking at you all crazy while you shaving. And it's like, yo, man, like what's going on around here?
Right.
And then of course, so there he is trying to make his money, trying to, be worthy of his love. And then it hit him with the three girls. It's like, yo, what? And I remember watching the Bram Stoker's Dracula and Monica Bellucci comes, rising up out of the mattress.
Oh,
I was
man.
like, good Lord, take me away now. That'd be the end of Steve. I'll tell you that's a wrap. Like, stop it.
That's the seduction part of it too, like this
And
of
that
the
is
lore,
the
right?
seduction part of it.
There's, they're monsters and they're gonna kill you and turn you into these, this curse where you live forever, but you have to consume blood. It's just awful, but it's seductive. Like they get hypnotized. That's part of it. There's a sexual undertone. You see it in Interview with the Vampire. You see it in all these other
It's all
adaptations. That's part of the story, So
yeah, and I think it's part of those things that make it make sense.
mhm.
The fact that apparently the bite itself is supposed to induce orgasm in some of these versions of these different stories and everything else like that. When Gary Oldman is having Winona Ryder as Mina feeding off his cut chest, when he starts doing this, that's
Like, forget subtext. It's pretty blatant what they're trying to go for.
yeah, it's like that feels real good. Okay, I got it now. That's not just like your average massage at the spa.
Yeah.
This is some other stuff right here.
Yeah.
But yeah, the seduction thing, that is a huge part of it. Again, going back to something that I read as a kid and then had to read again as a grown man in like
One of the
Carmela.
things that prefaced, yep.
And that's, and I want to say that's something else that Stoker kind of, got his fingers in a little bit. It's like, I may take a little of this and and just the whole, again, a stranger brought to a castle, and it just becomes this this thing where it's like I've seen you in a dream, and
Mhm.
you know, and I love you. Carmela really starts like in terms of like kicking game. Like she lets things kind of like settle in a little bit.
Mhm.
Maybe take a nip here or nip there if you like kind of reading between the lines. But then once you basically get to chapter 2, she's laying it on thick. She's
Yeah.
just like, look, I love you,
Yeah.
okay? And again, that's part of the seduction because hey, everybody,
Yeah. Yeah. A
as
lot
the
of
Blues
these,
Brothers would say, everybody needs somebody to love.
exactly. Now, there's a lot of these with like female vampires, and that kind of ties into the whole succubus uh, legends and stuff too, where
Mm-hmm.
people are afraid to go to sleep because they might be, these monsters might come and suck their spirit out, and usually
Yeah.
it's a seductive woman, or, in the, other times it's a male, right? And it's just, that's still that seduction that's going on. It's, pretty scary. But you had The Bride of Corinth in 1797. That was a poem that had these female vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Carmilla was 1872, so right in his lifetime. So he was definitely inspired by that. You can't say that he wasn't.
Oh, 100%.
So yeah. So that's pretty cool. Did you know he died from syphilis, Bram Stoker?
I'm not surprised.
Just
I
so
mean,
he maybe
let's just say that's on brand.
yeah. So we went through that. What about all the spoofs? Like we talked about, like you had comedy versions then that were inspired. Were they making fun of Dracula or were they making fun of Bela Lugosi? So you had George Hamilton in Love at First Bite. You had Leslie
I
Nielsen,
don't.
the Mel Brooks story, Dracula Dead and Loving It. You've got
Yeah.
Adam Sandler's cartoon Hotel Transylvania with the
Pennsylvania.
accent. It's all, I think, Bela Lugosi kind of mimicry,
It's
but
Bela Lugosi Foundation. I don't know if it's a mockery per se. I want to lean towards calling them tributes,
okay.
especially the George Hamilton thing.
Yeah.
Especially George Hamilton. I feel like, yeah, he was like, he fully leaned into the accent and the
Hmm.
whole thing. He definitely was playing straight in this hilarious surrounding. But I don't see George Hamilton's thing as disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leslie Nielsen, of course, is Leslie Nielsen. He, the whip from
Yeah, and that was
what?
the era when Mel Brooks, I think, was just kind of like, what else haven't I spoofed? Robin Hood, Dracula, let's just make a little bit of everything.
Yes.
It didn't have the heart when he was like making fun of Westerns or, the Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein. I think that's where like a lot of his heart came from. And that's why those were such classics. Those were so good. And, so you see Dracula everywhere. You've got Count Chocula, the cereal, right? You got the Count on Sesame Street. That's totally Dracula. It's not just any random vampire. It's Dracula. So it really has kind of impacted pop culture everywhere you go. So do you feel sometimes that it kind of hinders you as a writer when you're doing stuff about vampires, that you're like, there are these like stereotypes that people expect? So do you sit there and say, well, okay, where am I going to put in the wooden stake scene, or when am I going to,
No, I didn't feel hindered. And as a matter of fact, because I've seen enough people take creative license
Okay.
to realize that as long as I, again, adhere to the rule of set the rules and stick to them,
Mm-hmm.
I felt comfortable making my slight little changes and adaptations and everything else like that. I was good with that. What is funny, or where pop culture comes into play as far as, people giving me a hard time, is when I have a coworker that will actually sit down and Photoshop me on a box of Count Chocula.
No, they don't.
Oh, I will send you the picture, and then of course, once that happens, then people actually start calling you Count Chocula,
Huh.
and like little stuff like that, it's like, because I have coworkers that know that I do this. So of course I'll be walking down the hallway or something. I just say hello to somebody and they act overly scared. "Oh, don't hurt me, Steve, and that kind of thing. That's where the pop culture thing. Well, that, and of course every vampire related thing in the world. It's like, so what did you think of this? What did you think of that? Well, I did have to sleep last night, so I actually didn't watch that yet.
Can't watch everything, right?
I mean, Jesus. And then every
Yeah.
once in a while, it'd be nice to watch, like, Only Murders in the Building or something
Right.
like that, to just kind of cleanse the palate and then come back to my horror stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where that's where the that's where the hilarity would ensue as far as all that goes.
And I feel they have to bring in like the Dracula character and some of these other vampire movies. Like, yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you got Supernatural, and lo and behold, there's the Dracula character in at least one episode of each one of those series. So it's like they almost feels like they have to include him. Like, he exists, he's out there.
Right. And
So
and if it's not pinpointed as Dracula, it's somebody very much
very
like.
much
It's like
similar. Like,
this
yeah,
is this like
they're not calling him Dracula, but that's Dracula. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned the comic books, and I got to tell you, Tomb of Dracula, Marv Wolfman Marvel series, that was another big influence on me, and it was like just quintessential. It was so good, and that's where Blade came come.
Yep. Yep. I love the Blade character.
Yes, and it was funny because it's like if you notice how Blade is drawn through the comics over the years, it's like he reflects the current look of the current look of us brothers. Because when they first introduced him in the 70s, he had a fro. He was basically Shaft, but he was just throwing wooden knives. And he had like the brown leather coat and everything else like that. And now he's just all like slicked out in all black leather. He's got a samurai sword, and he's and all that good stuff. It's kind of a shame that Marvel can't get their shit together as far as a reboot goes.
Yeah. I was
But
waiting
yeah,
for it.
but yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. I feel like eventually Marvel is going to give us some version of Dracula. I had no idea who they would cast.
Yeah, neither do I.
At this particular
But
point.
you have so much, and it's a public domain character now, and it's like you have a
Mhm.
history of doing it, and it was so successful. Why not? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then we jump the ship to the other comic book company, DC. One of their biggest characters, Batman. Like, he was inspired by Zorro, but also by Dracula. Like the cape and the
Yes.
poses and bringing fear. That's not Zorro. That's more like Dracula.
True.
So yeah. So I think Batman owes a lot to Dracula. So that's the
Percent. Because I think when you're a rich guy and you're trying to figure out how to scare people, a bat costume is not a bad idea, as
there
it
you
turns
go.
out.
Yeah. Shadows in the night. That's pretty
Exactly.
cool. So for Halloween, did you ever get a cape and the fake fangs and go around trick or
Fake.
treating? As
Well, all right. Well, when I was a child that didn't have any money, yeah, I had all kinds of plastic, stupid, whatever,
the
did
glow in the
until
dark fangs.
somebody was like, yo, take that shit out your mouth or I'll beat you up. Yeah, sure, I did all that. And I actually have custom fangs now. They just clip
Nice.
right in.
My daughter
You
got the
know.
same. It was like when she wanted to become some vampire for Halloween. She made me order these like real like I was like, holy cow, those look real. Those look like
Mm.
Hollywood quality. They weren't that expensive, but I was like, in the old days, we just had like these little things that
The little
you could
things, I
barely
know.
fit in your mouth, and it would destroy your teeth and it would mess you up. But
Well, I'll do you slightly better in the sense that I went to a guy and had a full, like a fitting, like there was a
nice.
mold.
That's the way to
There was a
go.
whole thing, and yeah, I can actually sit at the party and drink wine and not worry about anything.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
And it's the most awesome visual. Everybody's just like, look at this guy.
See,
you know?
that's how I would like one night to just go out with my friends and have those like really awesome fangs, and nobody knows, and then somebody just like kind of gives somebody a smile, and it's like the real vampire
yeah.
fangs. They
Oh,
might
yeah.
freak out.
No, but I do
That's
it up.
great.
I got the fangs, I got the contact lenses, I got the different
Contact lenses.
outfits.
That's
I
great.
mean, technically, I wore this shirt because I was like, yeah, we're gonna be talking about Dracula, so let me.
That's the way. Yep. It's very very on point, on brand. So that's good.
Yes.
So tell me more about your series, like the Brookwaters Curse trilogy, right? That's the vampire story that you've written about. Tell me a little bit about the plot and where people can get a copy of. There's 3 books, right? Or are there more?
There's 3. There's 3.
Okay.
A 4th in the works. But as life has gotten more complicated, it's actually a little harder to finish a book now. I'll get into that a little bit. But so Brookwater's Curse is about an 1860s Georgia plantation slave who becomes a vampire. And the third book actually sort of ends as Obama is being elected in 2008. And it's funny because this is me using the day job stuff, because I'm a TV show stage manager when I'm not writing stuff and trying to scare people. So when I was writing a scene that basically closes out the third book, I made sure that no one was on the roof of the Viacom building that night. You know what I mean? So
I
it's
know what
like,
you're going.
so basically what I did was I was like, oh, where can I stage this last thing? It's like, well, wait a minute. I work for MTV. All I got to do is ask the facilities manager, who's also one of my best friends, hey, Mark, nobody was on the roof of the building when the whole Obama thing happened. They were like, what are you talking about? Of course not. Duh.
There you go.
And it's
You
all
got the premise.
the little bits. It's the research and everything else like that. But basically, yes, he becomes a vampire. He goes through a variety of things that not just vampirism per se. He also becomes vampire law enforcement. And it's as he starts to realize what the vampire government is actually doing, he becomes disillusioned. And then there's that. And, and there's, and then there's people he cares about, other monsters included in that, but also various women that he falls for over the centuries or whatever. So yeah, that's the basic gist of it. And it's a little bit of everything. There might even be a joke or two, like a couple of lines in it that'll actually, at least that's what I'm told, make people laugh a little bit, because I also believe that you can't just, with a horror story, you can't just keep hammering. You gotta create a little levity. So then when the tension starts to build and everything else like that, you like to put your reader on a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. And that's what I think achieved with that series. And then I have a serial killer series, a hyper intelligent Black woman who becomes a socially conscious serial killer. And that came from different things. That basically came from me watching and reading Thomas Harris's Hannibal Lecter stuff, and also there's the true crime documentaries, Ted Bundy and so on, Charles
Very
Manson.
popular now, all those true crime genres.
Baby, but it kind of occurred to me that whenever they're depicting a Black woman who's running around killing people, it's usually just because she's pissed off at something some guy did. And then when it's a Caucasian male, then he's just this like charismatic genius, and he's so alluring and so whatever, and type of guy that can be under all kinds of surveillance and all kinds of this kind of that, and then still escape a maximum security prison or and something like that. And it's like, you know what, I'm gonna switch that up. So that was the basis of that series. And the other thing that I'm a part of is something that I have been working on with my fellow horror writers of color, Mark Abbott, Kirk Johnson, and Denise Tapscott is joining in on the third book. So the first book really started off as myself and Mark Abbott getting drunk, and we were having this, not so much a pity party, but definitely one of those things where it was like, I think we had both gotten stories rejected from anthologies. And we're both throwing back a few, and it's like, we should just put this, this, it's like, that like that old scene from one of those detective movies. But anyway, it's one of those moments where it's like, we're going to buy this bar, it's like that. So I remember I woke up the next morning, I was like, what did I just agree to? But we put together this thing, which is basically two Black horror writers walk into a bar, and the bartender tries to feed them to the demon Baphomet, and they have to tell stories to get out of it. When you read it, it's kind of like, it's almost got like kind of sort of like an Arabian Nights kind of thing happening there. We use our actual names, which was funny because Mark was kind of in charge of putting together the final battle, and he has me doing some wild stuff in that last fight. And I was like, yo, I'm gonna have to go to the gym because nobody's gonna I got to get back I gotta get back into weights, you know. So we did that. We won collectively. We won some African American literary awards off of that.
That is awesome. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. No, that was a great night.
That's where all these great ideas come from. You know, like Mary Shelley just hanging out during a dark and stormy night, and they were all like, "Let's start hanging out in the bar," and just like, let's do it ourselves. You know,
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, exactly. Then we did a sequel and we brought in Kirk Johnson. And Kirk, he's kind of what I love about Kirk is a sword and sorcery guy. He can write something disturbing as well, but he's also kind of got that Ray Harryhausen thing happening, but in some cases, with like an African edge. And he knows the shit. He knows the Templar, Knights of Templar, and it kind of stuff just kind of rattles off his tongue. So, you know, it was great to bring him in on the second book, Hell at Brooklyn T. And we're working on the third installment of that. And we brought in Denise Tapscott for,
fantastic,
you know, for some nice witchy extra vampire flavor.
Fantastic.
And also she's on the West Coast. So, you know, that it's just nice to have all those ingredients. So I think when we finally finish that, I think people are really going to dig that.
I think so. It sounds great. And yeah, I like how you mentioned the serial killers. It's like, I guess vampires are like the original serial killers because they're going around every night hunting their prey.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So it's like that's the connection right there. You know, so very good, very good.
Also,
what have we left out about Dracula? No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and you also have to blend in.
Yeah,
like that's in real life. That's harder for a lot of people who aren't even serial killers. You know, you're just a little off, or you're just like, you know, a big fan of Avenged Sevenfold or something like that, and you're not quite where everybody else is, and you feel it, and you're an introvert, and you're this and that. For somebody that actually has the agenda of, well, who do I want to murder today? Like, that has to be that much harder.
Yeah,
if you think about it. What did we forget about Dracula? Outside of the porn stash, let's see. Well, you know, like I was kind of touching on the whole thing of, you know, him having weaknesses in you know, we explored that a little bit. But I think the one weakness that he would probably have in real life would be these diseases and COVID and
yeah, because you're sucking up the blood. There must have been a story or two that's played on that, where it's like,
yeah, definitely,
it's not healthy blood or something. That could be a weakness. You're right. That's totally, yeah,
more so. Because again, I mean, just as human beings, right, we're susceptible to bad nutrition. You know, we're susceptible to, you know, GMOs and all kinds of stuff is messing people up, especially these days with, you know, food being processed the way it is. So yeah, I think that would be like a real problem for him. He might actually have to, I don't know, make his own, like keep like a little farm. And I know that's been explored in different movies too, just like have like a little supply or a little stash. Actually, I think they did that in one of the Blade movies.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there's a lot of ways you can go with vampires. They've done space vampires. They've done, you know, like, it's just a lot of things you can do.
Yeah.
And I like what you mentioned about, you know, him trying to come up with some, when we talk about serial killers, it's like, that's a great thing that Dracula had kind of added to the genre. The fact that he's living this double life. Like, you know, he is this count that people kind of know as a strange person living in a castle, but it's not just a monster running in the woods and killing people. It's like, got that double identity. People think they're a noble person. Invite me to your cocktail party, you know, and I'll seduce your fiance and her best friend. That's how he gets his victims. Right?
And you know what? So you just reminded me of something else that's always bothered me about that particular story. Because I know he's cool, he's slick, he's this, he's that, but I don't know a single woman, not in my life anyway, where I could have bitten your best friend. And I got her running around the insane asylum, snatching up babies. I got all this craziness happening, but I love you. It's like, yeah, no, I don't see that working. So Bram Stoker, I don't know what was going on in his love life. Maybe he was a boss like that. I don't know. But yeah, son, that's harder to believe than vampires themselves. I mean, if
That's
I
true.
gotta be 100% about it.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, look, it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Bram Stoker came up with a legendary, altogether unforgettable creature, and he is in fact immortal and
Yeah.
will probably always will be.
Yeah. And then I was surprised he didn't do more Dracula stories. They did a sequel, which was actually a chapter that they cut from the novel, right? That became Dracula's guest. But, like you said, immortal. People know him to this day. It's one of the classics of literature, not just horror, but all literature. It's a great, the way he tells it, the way, the characters go through. So worth reading, worth seeing every single Dracula movie out there, the good and the bad. And there are a lot of bad, but there's also a lot of good. And that's why they keep tapping into it. So
That's right.
my guest today has been Stephen Van Patten. SVP, thank you for being here. Please check out his books, the Brookwaters Curse trilogy. There's others that he's written. I'll put a link to his website, and I'll read it again. It's laughingblackvampire.com. Check it out. And please like, subscribe, add a comment. Tell us what you think. What's your favorite Dracula movie? And tune in next time for greatest characters in pop culture history.